brother, the legendary king of pop, Michael Jackson, passed away on Thursday. It is believed he suffered cardiac arrest in his home.
Michael Jackson died 17 years ago, but the question around his fortune still does not feel settled. He was one of the most famous entertainers on earth, a man whose music kept earning long after the final headlines faded. From the outside, people expected a simple answer: family, children, inheritance, closure. But the deeper you look, the less simple it becomes. His fortune did not just sit in a bank account waiting to be handed over. It moved through documents, trusts, court filings, and decisions made after his death by people the public barely understood. The strange part is not only who was meant to receive the money, it is who had the power to control it. Somewhere inside that legal structure was a choice Michael made before the world knew it would matter. And when that choice was finally opened, it raised one quiet question. Did Michael Jackson leave his fortune to the person people expected, or to the one person he trusted to control everything? The will nobody expected. Michael Jackson died on June 25, 2009, and the first estate filing placed his fortune at about $236 million. But the document that decided where everything would go was not written after his death. It had been signed on July 7, 2002, nearly 7 years earlier, and later surfaced through the Los Angeles Superior Court. That timing matters, because the final decision had been waiting long before the public knew there was a decision to read. When the will was unsealed, the first name missing was Joe Jackson. Managed Michael's childhood career and was still publicly speaking as if he remained close to his son. But in the will, he received nothing, not a share, not a gift, not even a small personal bequest. Under California law, that kind of silence does not look accidental. It reads like a choice. The same silence surrounded the siblings. Jermaine, Jackie, Tito, Marlon, Randy, Janet, and Rebby were not given control of the fortune either. The Jackson family had built one of the most famous musical names in the world, yet the most famous member chose a structure that made the will feel less like a family document and more like a locked door. The money was directed into the MJJ Family Trust, a private structure that named Katherine Jackson. But being named as a beneficiary is not the same as controlling the fortune. The trust could protect them financially while keeping real decision-making power somewhere else. That difference is where the mystery becomes serious, because the public saw family names, but the authority sat behind the structure. The detail most people miss is this: Michael Jackson's will did not hand his fortune directly to a family member. It placed power over that fortune in the hands of two men. One had been fired by Jackson 6 years earlier. The other was quietly brought back just days before he died. So why did Michael trust them with the machine behind his legacy more than his own family? To understand that choice, we have to look at what Michael Jackson was actually leaving behind, because the fortune was not as safe as it looked. The fortune nobody knew was broken. Michael Jackson's fortune looked enormous from the outside, but when he died in 2009, the private numbers told a different story. He owed more than $400 million in debt. Much of that money had been borrowed against his most valuable assets, especially his music publishing holdings. By then, those loans were becoming harder to manage, and the This Is It tour was not only a comeback, it was also a financial necessity. Neverland Ranch showed how serious the situation had become. The 2,700-acre property in Los Olivos, California, once one of the most famous private estates in the world, was at active risk of foreclosure. After Jackson's death, one of the estate's first urgent moves was to stabilize that property. Eventually, a controlling stake was sold to an investment fund connected with Colony Capital, showing that even his most personal landmark had become part of a larger financial rescue. The executors first filed the estate's value at about $236 million. That number sounded huge, but it was challenged almost immediately. The challenge did not come from the Jackson family. It came from the United States government. The IRS argued that the estate was worth far more than the executors claimed, and that disagreement turned the inheritance into a legal and financial battlefield. The gap between the estate's valuation and the IRS position would eventually grow to nearly $900 million. That made it one of the largest estate tax disputes in American history. If the government won, the tax bill could have consumed a major part of what Jackson left behind. The fortune people imagined as secure was actually at risk of being broken apart before it ever reached the people named in the trust. This was not a clean inheritance waiting to be handed over. It was a financial emergency hidden inside a public grieving period. Behind the headlines, the estate had debt, tax pressure, property risk, and assets that needed careful control. The two men named in the 2002 will were not just managing money. They were trying to keep the whole machine from collapsing. Before the estate could become a $2 billion empire, someone had to take control. And the man who gained the most authority had once been pushed out of Michael Jackson's life. The lawyer who was fired, then called back. John Branca had been part of Michael Jackson's financial world since the early 1980s. He was not just a lawyer handling paperwork. He helped shape the deals that protected Jackson's music power. In 1985, Branca negotiated the $47.5 million purchase of the ATV music catalog, the deal that later became the spine of the estate. For nearly 2 decades, he was one of Jackson's most trusted financial architects. Then, in 2003, everything changed. Michael Jackson fired John Branca, and the exact reason was never fully confirmed in public. The timing matters because this was one of the most unstable periods of Jackson's life, marked by legal pressure, public controversy, and difficult personal decisions. Branca was no longer inside the circle. His direct access to the catalog, the estate planning, and Jackson's financial machine was gone. In mid-June 2009, only about 1 to 2 weeks before Jackson died, Branca suddenly came back. He received a letter reinstating him as Michael Jackson's attorney and co-executor of the estate. The document was signed by Jackson himself. That one letter changed the entire future of the fortune because it restored Branca to a position of power just days before the will became active. No public explanation has ever fully answered why it happened at that exact moment. Jackson was deep in "this is it" rehearsals, under heavy physical and emotional pressure. Reports described him as exhausted, underweight, and dependent on prescription medication. Yet in that final stretch, he signed a document returning one of the most powerful financial roles in his life to a man he had removed 6 years earlier. When Michael Jackson died 11 to 14 days later, that reinstatement letter became the foundation for everything that followed. John Branca became co-executor of an estate that would eventually grow into a $2 billion enterprise. The mystery is not whether the letter existed. The mystery is whether reinstating Branca was fully Jackson's own final decision, and why no one can completely answer that question. To understand why that timing matters, we have to look at what Branca was actually handed, and how valuable Michael Jackson's estate became after death. What the estate was really worth. Michael Jackson's estate did something almost impossible after his death. In the first 12 months after June 25, 2009, it earned an estimated $250 million to $275 million. That was more than Jackson had earned in any single year while alive. The strange part was not just the amount. It was the timing. At the exact moment the estate took legal control, Demand for his music, image, and life surged around the world. This Is It became the first major proof of that power. Released in October 2009, less than 4 months after Jackson died, the film was built from his final rehearsal footage. It earned about $261 million worldwide and became the highest-grossing concert film in history at that point. For the estate, this was not just a movie release. It showed how quickly John Branca and John McClane could turn unfinished material into a massive financial result. The fortune, however, was never just cash sitting in an account. Most of its value lived inside intellectual property. Music publishing rights, name and likeness rights, royalties and licensing deals. That matters because these assets do not manage themselves. Their value grows or falls based on choices made over time. Every deal, every approval, every license, and every public use of Michael Jackson's image could affect the estate for years. Back in 1985, Jackson had bought the ATV music catalog for $47.5 million. That catalog included publishing rights connected to most of the Beatles' songs. Later, Jackson merged it with Sony's publishing arm, creating Sony/ATV Music Publishing, one of the biggest music publishers in the world. A deal made decades earlier had become the center of the fortune people were now fighting to understand. The estate Branca inherited was not a simple pile of money. It was a living machine made of catalogs, royalties, contracts, licensing rights, and brand decisions that could shape value for decades. Whoever controlled it was not just protecting an inheritance. They were operating one of the most valuable entertainment businesses on Earth. And in 2016, that control led to one decision so large that it revealed exactly how much power the executors really had. The $750 million decision. In 2016, 7 years after Michael Jackson's death, the estate made its largest single move. It sold Jackson's 50% stake in Sony/ATV Music Publishing to Sony for about $750 million. This was not a rushed sale to escape collapse. It was a planned decision over a massive asset made at the moment the estate's leadership believed the price and timing were right. The power behind that decision is the part that matters. Catherine Jackson did not make the sale. Prince, Paris, and Biggie did not make it either. The authority belonged to the two executors named through the 2002 will, John Branca and John McClane. The family could benefit from the money, but the choice to sell, the buyer, the price, and the timing all sat with the men controlling the estate. The sale did not mean Michael Jackson's own music was gone. The estate still kept the Mijak music catalog, which includes publishing rights tied to songs like Thriller, Billie Jean, Beat It, and many more Jackson compositions. Industry estimates place Mijak between $900 million and more than $1 billion today. That catalog was separate from the Sony/ATV deal, and it remains one of the most important pieces of the estate. Beyond catalogs, the estate kept building new income. It created revenue through Cirque du Soleil, global touring projects, merchandise, film and television licensing, streaming royalties, and a Las Vegas concept. None of these were passive assets. Each one needed approvals, negotiations, and careful brand control. Every choice affected how Michael Jackson's name would be used and how much money the estate could keep producing. By every financial measure, the estate had been transformed. The original $236 million filing from 2009 had become a $2 billion-plus enterprise. But the same success also made the central question harder to ignore. Did Branca's control protect the family, or did it move real power away from the people Michael Jackson wanted to benefit? That question did not stay outside the courtroom. The Jackson family asked it too, and the answer they received was not what they expected. The government came for the whole thing. While Michael Jackson's estate was earning hundreds of millions, it was also fighting the United States government over taxes. The IRS opened a formal dispute over the estate's value, and the gap between both sides was almost impossible to ignore. This was not a small filing problem. It was a legal battle that could decide whether the fortune survived or had to be broken apart. The estate's executors valued Michael Jackson's name and likeness rights at about $2,105. Their legal argument was that at the moment of his death in 2009, Jackson's public image had been damaged by years of controversy, court pressure, and financial instability. In simple terms, they argued the brand had very little commercial value on the exact day he died. The IRS saw the same asset in a completely different way. It valued Michael Jackson's name and likeness rights at $434 million. The government argued that even with the controversy, Jackson's image still carried huge earning power. To them, the estate's low number looked like a tax strategy, not the true value of one of the most famous names in music. The total dispute between the estate and the IRS passed $700 million. If the government had won on every major point, the estate could have faced a tax bill large enough to force bad asset sales and undo parts of what John Branca had built. The case, Estate of Michael J. Jackson versus Commissioner of Internal Revenue, lasted more than a decade. In 2021, a U.S. tax court judge ruled in favor of the estate on key points, including the value of the name and likeness rights. A settlement followed, though the full terms were not publicly revealed. The estate avoided the worst outcome, but after surviving debt, taxes, and years of pressure, one question became harder to avoid. Who was watching the people in charge? The answer is that the Jackson family tried, and when they did, the fight moved from money to the will itself. The family said it was fake. In July 2013, 4 of Michael Jackson's siblings made the estate fight even more serious. Janet, Jermaine, Randy, and Rebby Jackson signed and distributed a letter claiming the 2002 will was a forgery. Their argument focused on one detail. They said Michael was in New York City on July 7, 2002, the same day the will was supposedly signed in Los Angeles. The claim went before the court and was examined in Los Angeles Superior Court. A probate judge found the will valid, and the forgery allegation was rejected. But the accusation still mattered. 4 famous siblings had publicly accused the executors of controlling the estate through a document they did not trust. That showed how deep the split had become. Katherine Jackson was in a difficult position during this period. She was named as the children's guardian and listed as a primary beneficiary of the MJJ Family Trust. Most viewers would assume that gave her control, but it did not. The decisions about what to sell, what to license, and what to protect were made by the executors, not by Katherine. In 2012, reports described tension between Katherine Jackson and the estate's executors over communication, decision-making, and her understanding of the trust's financial activity. She was protected by the will, but protection and power were not the same thing. The trust could support her while still keeping her away from the biggest decisions. The forgery challenge revealed the deeper wound inside the estate. Michael Jackson had written a will that kept his father and siblings away from control, and years later, that exclusion had still not been accepted. Whether the claim came from real belief, legal strategy, or both, the result was clear. The family by blood was not the family with power. With the family pushed outside control and the trust still private, the next question becomes even more important. What did Prince, Paris, and Biggie actually inherit? The most realistic account of the one person. The most accurate answer is not as simple as saying Michael Jackson left everything to one person. Katherine Jackson and the 3 children received the financial benefits of the estate. but John Branca received the authority to build and manage it. That difference matters, because money and control are not the same thing. The title points to the person who held the real operating power behind the fortune. Branca has never been credibly shown to have mismanaged the estate. The financial record is hard to ignore. More than $2 billion in revenue over 17 years, survival through a $700 million IRS dispute, and a $750 million asset sale at a favorable moment. As executor, his legal job was to protect and grow the estate for the beneficiaries, and by the numbers, he did that. The harder question is whether Michael Jackson meant to give that much concentrated authority when he signed the 2002 will. He was 43 years old at the time, and there was no clear reason for him to believe the document would be used only 7 years later. He may have expected to update it. He never did. That makes the will valid, but it also makes the intention behind it harder to fully read. The June 2009 reinstatement letter is the detail that keeps the mystery alive. It brought Branca back just days before Jackson died. One reading is that Michael understood his situation was fragile and wanted a strong financial operator in place. Another reading is that he was vulnerable and surrounded by pressure. What is confirmed is that the letter existed, and it became the doorway to control. The most grounded version is this. Michael Jackson left behind an imperfect, unfinished, and partly outdated legal structure that gave huge power to a skilled operator. That operator grew the fortune, but whether every deal, image use, partnership, and music decision matched what Michael would have wanted is a question that eventually belongs to Prince, Paris, and Biggie. That question now leads to the one asset still sitting at the center of everything: the music Michael Jackson wrote, protected, and left behind. The music nobody can buy yet. The 2016 Sony/ATV sale closed one major chapter. The publishing rights connected to the Beatles catalog moved permanently to Sony, and that part of Michael Jackson's estate was no longer in family hands. But one catalog remained inside the estate. Mijak Music still holds publishing rights tied to Jackson's own compositions, and the songs most closely connected to his legacy. The value of Mijak is the reason this final question matters. Industry estimates place it between $900 million and more than $1 billion. It includes music tied to Thriller, Billie Jean, Beat It, Man in the Mirror, and many other songs connected to Jackson's name. These rights decide how the music is licensed, where it can be used, and who earns from every stream, sync deal, or commercial placement. The three children will eventually face the question that Michael Jackson could not answer from a will signed in 2002. Prince, Paris, and Biggie may choose to keep the catalog, sell it, or shape its future in a way no executor can fully predict. Whether they act together, whether they agree, and what price they would accept for something carrying their father's name are still unknown. Each child has lived near the inheritance in a different way. Paris Jackson has built a life partly outside the estate's commercial machine through music and acting on her own terms. Biggie has remained mostly private. Prince Michael Jr. has moved toward business and philanthropy. These are three different paths around the same legacy, and one day those paths may meet at the catalog. So the fortune did not go to one person in the simple way people expect. It went into a trust, a legal structure, and a body of intellectual property operated by John Branca for 17 years. But the fortune was always pointed toward the children. The Mijak catalog is still there, still unsold, and when its future is decided, it may reveal the final answer to what Michael Jackson truly left behind. When Prince, Paris, and Biggie decide what happens to their father's music, the world will finally see whether the songs stay with the family or become someone else's empire. Michael Jackson's fortune did not end with one simple name. It left behind power, music, and unanswered questions. Subscribe and tell us who you think truly inherited his legacy today.